Let's check on my produce, tend to my livestock and birds, do something with my in-game spouse instead of going outside and getting a real spouse. Oh, now I'm fishing. I'm gonna catch him. Ooh. Nightmare or ultraviolence? I don't remember Nightmare being available at the beginning. Maybe I'll choose ultraviolence and see how I feel. Oh no, not again. In the age of fire and ruin, when the legions of hell first set foot upon Argent Tenur, another came, an outsider, his path to their world carved in blood, for the demons could not escape his wrath. The night sentinels, desperate and broken, saw in him a weapon. Their gods, ever watchful, saw something more. They bestowed upon him strength beyond mortal flesh, speed beyond thought, a gift now tethered to their will. Khalim, planet of Argent Tenur. We are a planet of straight men. COVID-19 isn't real.
Summon him.
We need him.
Launch the Slayer.
Impact confirmed. The Slayer has been activated.
Power Gauntlet. This is like Blood Punch from the last game, it seems. Power Gauntlet. Power Gauntlet. There's nothing straighter than lifting fists off the floor. Life Sigils. I guess 1-ups are too juvenile, but you can only have 3 at a time. I like that. I also like how it asks for permission instead of activating automatically. Oh, it's a real key instead of a card. Rather than a flamethrower, the R key activates the shield. This is much better. Holy bejesus, that's cool. Doom, the Dark Ages, illustrates an epic legend from across the stars. Locked in a stalemate, King Novik's legion of chivalrous Knight Sentinels and Prince Azarak's army of miserable demons fight for control over Cthulhu, who will help its captors' side secure victory. That's not a joke. Intuition might suggest that the Dark Ages expands the gameplay and narrative of its 2 predecessors, but it actually uses Doom 2016 as a reference point for a different arena-based FPS experience. Many recognize Doom as the campiest of franchises that pits hulking space marines of the future against merciless demons with sharp claws, big teeth, and heavy artillery. In the latest installment, a new dark fantasy aesthetic turns this timeless series upside down with enemies who demand deadlier precision and an arsenal that demands a more conservative playstyle outside the Slayer's typical repertoire. 2016 and Eternal improved Doom, translating an old game that hadn't allowed for gameplay within a genuine 3D space into something infinitely more modern that still felt like Doom. The Dark Ages makes no such attempt at emulation, reimagining Doom as an offbeat arena-based FPS in which to take advantage of several mechanics beyond pure marksmanship. Now, what does a conservative edition of Doom look like, and what does that bring to the table? The Dark Ages requires more discipline in that knowing when to use an ability has become more important than using every ability as often as possible. Eternal is certainly difficult, maybe more difficult than the Dark Ages if you ask me, but success in Eternal depends mostly on the ability to multitask, not on the ability to determine the most effective weapon or tactic. In the Dark Ages, you must remain close to weak enemies and distance yourself from strong ones, note projectiles you can parry and those to avoid, or decide whom to kill and whom to leave alive until you need more resources. In Eternal, so many demons require so much firepower that slamming your face on the keyboard is a valid strategy. It might not get you very far, but it won't get you anywhere in the Dark Ages. You can have all the abilities and weapons in the history of gaming, but without explicit use cases for each, there's no point in having any of them. The concrete presence of explicit use cases depends on 2 major aspects of gameplay: the arsenal and the enemies. The actual guns don't differ too much from counterparts in other games. Reminiscent of Quake, each weapon is little beyond a medieval version of a classic one that's existed since Doom's arrival in the 90s, such that the Ballistic Force crossbow has supplanted the Ballistic Force gun. If you've played other modern Doom games, among the most immediate differences you'll notice at the beginning is that there are no weapon attachments. Shortly after unlocking a weapon in 2016 and Eternal, you decide which of 2 weapon attachments you want to use earlier in the campaign. The Dark Ages makes this decision for you, handing you a separate weapon within the same class a couple levels later. Instead of switching attachments for the same weapon, you use 2 weapons within the same class. The exception is the Chain Shot, which has no other weapon in its class on account of being the game's Gauss cannon. Weapon effects also differ from those in 2016 and Eternal. Instead of micro-missiles, the machine gun's replacement exerts the pincushion effect. If you fill a demon with needles, you can throw the shield at it to have those needles burst away from that demon into neighbors. I like pincushion not because the enemy full of needles functions as a grenade, but because the effect causes enemies to lose balance. Between a few helpful abilities and devastating passives, you can feel like your strategy is half the battle, though you can't go wrong with any abilities. Finally, as helpful as your favorite weapon can be, ammo capacity remains low enough at the beginning of the game to force you from your comfort zone with different weapons. You can't depend on one weapon for the entire experience. You must develop skills with all of them. In combination with these ordinary weapons, the versatile shield offers an actual ensemble that focuses on mobility as well as offense and defense. You can throw the shield like Captain America, which is useful for dispatching imps and grunts without wasting ammo. You can also throw it to immobilize larger prey. Most curiously, you can throw the shield to shatter any armor you've heated with weapons. It's similar to overloading plasma shields with plasma weapons, which is also possible in the Dark Ages. Enemies with shields of plasma or metal dot the outskirts of the battlefield, waiting for the Slayer to replenish armor and health by making them explode. If you've already talked to someone who's played the Dark Ages, you may be familiar with the immensely satisfying shield charge. Lock onto demons with the right mouse button, and fly through the air to smash into them with your trusty shield. So imagine using the meat hook no matter which weapon you're wielding. Parrying is another important piece of the puzzle. Not only is it an extra means by which to protect yourself, but it's a chance to redirect some of the most powerful attacks in the game at enemies. Does parrying work in a first-person context? Well, yeah, you face the attack and block at the right time. We gamers may not have acclimated to this, but the mechanic remains as intuitive as it does in a third-person context. Also, you can only parry green projectiles, so every chance to parry is a real opportunity to turn the tide of battle. You can also block with the shield, wow. However, it'll shatter shortly after you rely on it for protection, and you'll have to wait a few seconds for it to recharge, which is an eternity on the battlefield. With a flamethrower, a chainsaw, and 2 types of grenades, Doom Eternal provides a hefty arsenal too, but there's little indication as to what you should use at a given time. For example, I barely used the frost grenade at all. These gadgets simply don't work together the way the gun's melee weapons and shield do in the Dark Ages. A new game demands a new arsenal, and a new arsenal demands new enemies, or maybe the enemies demand the arsenal. In any case, truly excellent combat relies on a close relationship between the player's arsenal and a game's enemies. There are games with good combat, and there are games with bad combat, but there are no games with a good arsenal and bad enemies, or with a bad arsenal and good enemies. In such cases, all you'd notice is that the combat is bad. In the Dark Ages, enemies have 2 major shoes to fill, because that's generally how a pair of shoes works. The left shoe contains the enemy's technical ability to play nice with the parrying mechanic and the rest of the combat experience, while the right shoe contains the enemy's more abstract ability to complement the game's uniquely extra-dimensional settings without straying from the dark fantasy aesthetic. Unfortunately, the Creed maker doesn't fit either shoe because he has no legs. The development team has altered the original Revenants, Mancubi, and Cacodemons to fit these shoes, but it's also created extra enemies to complement a new Eldritch-themed area beyond reality and hell. Test your reflexes against the new Komodos and Agaddon Hunters, or parry more occasionally against hordes of Hell Knights and Imps. Whereas Doom Eternal succeeded through sheer quantity and diversity of enemies, the Dark Ages succeeds by diversifying enemies and making them more high maintenance overall. In terms of level design, design, the most important difference between the Dark Ages and its two predecessors is that in the former, nothing happens outside a level. In particular, Doom Eternal had levels that presented optional challenges to players. The game would whisk you away to a minigame, and you'd return to the actual level upon the minigame's completion. You could access such minigames from the menu or hub world. There are no extra challenges in the Dark Ages. They're simply part of the campaign. You don't have to do it all, but the point is that it's all in the level, whether you seek secret collectibles or activate optional gore nests that reward you with a greater capacity for health, armor, or ammo. Not only have the run-and-gun activities from previous games become part of actual levels, but the Slayer can do more than that thanks to his mech and pet dragon. Remember those demonic titans in 2016 and Eternal who decorated the background because they were too big to engage with you? In the Dark Ages, you can use the mech and the dragon to fight them, among other activities. With the mech, or Atlan, you engage in hand-to-hand combat against the titans. During these fights, you stagger and take advantage of enemies through perfect dodges, rather than parrying. Perfect dodges grant stagger opportunities and fill your combo meter such that once the meter fills, you can launch a devastating combo attack. Even on Nightmare, these battles are a little beyond glorified cutscenes, but there is a boss you fight with your mech, which is pretty cool. You'll kill some titans with your pet dragon, Seret, who also charges devastating combat abilities through perfect dodges, though combat with Seret is projectile-based. I enjoy Seret more than the Atlan because he's better woven into the rest of the game. Mostly, you'll pilot Seret among distinct nodes of activity, clearing landing zones and disabling ships to make way for the Slayer, who proceeds on foot. After the Slayer completes his business, he hops back on Seret and navigates to the next landing zone. Meanwhile, the Atlan is much more separate. The progression mechanic in the Dark Ages is the best I've seen in this franchise, owing most of its effectiveness to modularity and simplicity. As usual, you can upgrade your guns, but you can also upgrade your 3 melee weapons and your 4 shield runes that activate upon each parry. These stout avenues of progression are uniquely focused in comparison to predecessors. Simply select your favorite melee weapon, shield rune, and gun upgrades, after which you may return immediately to smashing. Could the development team have invited more strategy? Well, it's not really that type of game now, is it? Also, different upgrades cost different types of resources, so you can't hoard a resource and spend it all near the end of the game. The most common resource, gold, only provides access to the most basic upgrades. Rubies are necessary for intermediate upgrades, and Wraith Stones are necessary for ultimate upgrades. I haven't played Eternal much since its release in 2021, but I don't remember its progression being nearly as concise as that of the Dark Ages. In particular, I remember struggling with which runes to equip in Eternal. It's not always easy to strategize in an otherwise simple game that depends on skill anyway. The Dark Ages features a couple small quality of life improvements that make a big difference in terms of level navigation. The most important one is the point of no return. In new Doom games, many checkpoints lock you out of levels' earlier regions. Points of no return remind players to finish the search for secrets and collectibles before proceeding, saving a lot of aggravation for completionists like me. Next, you no longer need to look for a map near the beginning of the level. The Dark Ages provides one automatically. These maps also vaguely outline the locations of nearby secrets without divulging specifics, so you can still find secrets mostly by yourself. This further quality of life improvement is another barrier against repeating levels multiple times, making the game feel much more seamless. Finally, this game's primary collectibles are short and sweet. Mainly, there are dolls and codices. Also, the dolls are different from those in Eternal because of the new dark fantasy aesthetic. The Revenant has a hood now. I guess that gives more incentive to obtain them. I like collecting the dolls anyway. You can also find weapon skins throughout the 22 levels. Eternal and the Dark Ages are the two strongest contenders for best in franchise, especially when you consider that these two titles have allowed Doom to endure after 30 years. 15 minutes is a long time in the world of video games. Also, Doom is still good. There are plenty of franchises that aren't good anymore but are still technically around. The important thing about the Dark Ages isn't that it's somehow surpassed Eternal, but that these two modern installments of the Doom franchise naturally accompany each other as distinct experiences with a few key similarities. Doom veterans can expect a meaningfully different challenge from the Dark Ages, though experience with Eternal in 2016 will undoubtedly make the Dark Ages feel less disorienting. Ultimately, I recommend the Dark Ages to any gamer who exhibits the slightest familiarity with FPS mechanics.